I'm Andrew Bruce. I'm the CEO of MediSix Therapeutics. We're a cell therapy company. So MediSix Therapeutics licensed some technology from NUS, from Dario Campana's lab. Dario's got a track record in the very first CAR T therapy that came to market. He discovered the first commercial backbone, and I think there's a significant amount of confidence in not only the science but also the application for a very rare disease called T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. T-cell leukemias have remained a real challenge, and really interested to hear and learn from your experiences, as you're a little bit ahead of us in terms of the development of...
I'm Piers, Ingram, the co-founder and CEO of Hummingbird Bioscience. We're an oncology-focused therapeutics company. So Hummingbird was founded by myself and a colleague back in 2015, really around a drug target called HER3. It's a target which has been known to the field for many years and has been shown to be implicated in many, many different cancer types. The solution that we found to overcome why HER3 was resistant to these other drugs and to make a very potent inhibitor of HER3 has also been a broadly applicable platform. We've also used that same technology platform to go after other, what we think are really important drug targets in the oncology space and also beyond the oncology space. Also, very interested to hear about your experiences in the cell therapy space.
The way we have approached making sure that we can move our lead asset to the clinic as quickly as possible has been to build this network of academic institutions that can do cell therapy, that can manufacture the product, can work with the regulators. What has been really humbling is by working with these academic institutions that are so driven by medical need that they are very open to a dialogue around what's important to us, what kind of data would be useful for us to be able to present to investors. Actually, what we're using is them to fund the studies as an IIT rather than a study sponsored by MediSix. They have been very open to discussing what would be useful in terms of data gathering, what kind of information would be useful for the next phase of development. And particularly in Europe, it's useful that protocols drive a lot of the way the patients that we're interested in are treated. So we can collaborate in France, we can collaborate in the UK or in the Netherlands with institutions that will follow broadly the same protocol for treatment. But I think it's also helped us to move things forward a lot quicker than it would have been if we'd followed a traditional sort of CDMO, CRO model for doing clinical development.
What's been a little different about the path that we have taken is the use of partnerships to help us as an organization. Because as a small company with initially very strong preclinical science, but much less established clinical research experience, taking, as it was eventually, 2 programs into the clinic really in parallel was
ambitious.
ambitious. And we were fortunate to establish a collaboration partnership with Cancer Research UK, who helped us move one of the programs into the clinic, so we focused on the other one in parallel. Maybe I mentioned 2 other types of partnerships that are important to us. I think one is the collaborations with other companies in the pharmaceutical industry and biotech industry, where we know that a lot of drugs work best in combination. We hope, of course, that we can validate the activity of our drug early on in what are called monotherapy studies, so just our drug, and we can see that it has the biological effect that we needed to see and delivers some benefit to patients. But we expect that, in line with most other treatment paradigms these days, eventually it needs to be used in combination with other standard of care or emerging therapies. I think we've been really appreciative of how open the pharmaceutical companies are. Incredibly large, complex organizations are still willing to engage scientifically with very early stage companies. Sit down a few times a year, talk through the science, understand the development plans, share feedback on what they're looking for, what data might be helpful to them in evaluating kind of the next stage of the decision making. Sometimes even really commenting on kind of suggestions for experimental design and making connections. So I think I really want to call out how helpful some of those very large organizations have been in working with us to move the science forward.
And I think, when I first started in the industry, everything was very sort of closed, and you didn't really share too much, and what this company created and that company created were kept some distance apart for competitive reasons. And I think the reality of the way science has evolved is exactly what you just said, which is there's a much more open system approach to sharing ideas and thinking and how these things can come together with a view to curing patients from their diseases. And they're not simple and straightforward diseases. They're smarter than we are.
I think for Hummingbird, the key now is to really execute on the clinical programs that we've progressed forwards with. We should start, as I mentioned, some of the phase 1b, 2a studies in the next few months. These are studies in combination with other drugs, thanks to the collaborations that we've been able to establish. And I think there's an incredible body of work that's gone into trying to identify the correct clinical direction for these programs, which patient populations, which settings, which combination drugs to explore. And we will know fairly quickly whether we're right or wrong about this direction. I think we tried to mitigate the risk by testing several orthogonal hypotheses. So we're not just betting on one thing, but on several ideas that are slightly different, but still centered around the same biology that we know to be true. So I think we expect really in the next 12, 18 months to see the progress and kind of the fruition of 8 years of work on HER3.
I think.
And I think that obviously is in itself hopefully very meaningful progress for patients and can push the drug into late-stage clinical development and the market and broad use.
Right.
So that would really be amazing accomplishment for the organization and for everybody who's worked so hard on that project over almost a decade.
I think it's the interesting thing, isn't it? When you can see a technology with multiple applications on multiple disease areas. And the thing that gets me quite excited about the near term is we believe from the evidence that we've seen clinically that we may have a cure for some very particular rare diseases with our first asset and then our second asset. And we can do that relatively quickly because cell therapy enables you to go into treating patients a bit earlier than maybe, biologicals and certainly other types of small molecule treatments. We can get a read on efficacy relatively quickly and also on the safe dosing of the cell therapy. And that gives us a sort of platform from which we know there are other T-cell driven diseases that are really profound, really significantly affecting patients in the autoimmune space as well as in hematological malignancies. And so the ability to broaden out the number of patients that we can take cell therapy to and to tackle some diseases that really are quite challenging, I think sets a phenomenal platform for the technologies that we're developing. It will certainly change the medical practice and improve that, and definitely for patient outcomes. And I think it'll give a new lens for investors to look through and to think about how we can accelerate taking cell therapies to patients and to commercial return.
Good luck.